Welcome back to the Election Year Survival Guide. We are talking about discipleship opportunities presented in election years. And the next one we're going to talk about is the opportunity to talk about the source of our identity. Now, when we say identity these days, we often think of gender identity and the idea that sometimes people feel their gender is not, their actual gender is not in alignment with their sense of their gender. And so they want to change their body to come into alignment with their mental sense of themselves. And certainly this is a form of identity that should be addressed. But in the process of that, we can, again, zoom out and put that conversation about identity into the larger conversation about who determines who we are. Do we create our own identity, or is our identity created for us? And of course, the Christian answer to that is we are not self-created beings. We are the clay. We are not the potter. We do not get to complain about what the potter has turned us into, because that's in fact the purpose of our existence and the purpose of our lives, and we can find contentment and joy and satisfaction in that. But there are many other ways to make mistakes about our identity in the arena of our identity that have nothing to do with gender identity. And let's talk about 3 ways to get identity wrong. And the first has to do with received identities. Who are we getting identities from? Now, self-esteem is a word we hear often. And there's something about self-esteem that is not necessarily intuitive, but it's really important to understand. The self-esteem does not come from ourselves, even though it's referred to as self-esteem. In fact, self-esteem comes from the esteem of those we esteem. So how does that work? There's people that I respect, and I will receive self-esteem. I will start to feel good about myself when the people that I esteem feel good about me. And we understand pretty quickly how that operates in reality, in the real world, whether we have a group of professional colleagues that we want to admire us, whether we have a social circle in our community or school or profession that we want to admire us, or just a friend group that these are people that are important to me and I want them to approve of me. The moment we earn their approval, receive their approval, at least feel like we're getting their approval, that's the moment we begin to feel good about ourselves. We can see quickly, or at least we should be able to see quickly, where the landmines are in this. Because if our sense of self comes from how other people perceive us, we have made ourselves to be a slave, of course, of their opinions if it's the wrong kind of people. And the problem with placing our identity and our own joy in other people's perceptions of us is, as we've discussed in other lessons here, feelings are fickle. And other people might misunderstand us. They might have their own motives, good or bad, that affect how they react to us. And if our identity is fundamentally based in how they are going to respond to us, whether they approve of us or whether they don't approve of us, we have a very shaky foundation for the purpose of our lives. So received identities can be very, very unstable. But there's a second way that we can build an unstable identity for ourselves, and that is an achieved identity. And quickly we realize that a lot of our identities are based in the things that we can do. Now, it's good to take satisfaction in the gifts that God has given us, and God has made us great, great at our business, great at being parents, great at our creative capacity. We might be great artists, we might be great musicians, we might be, children, great video game players, and because we're better than other people, we feel good about ourselves. The risk here is that achieved identities are always based on comparison, and comparison never lasts eternally. Even if we are, Michael Jordan or Usain Bolt or whoever we perceive to be at the top of whatever their profession is, if it's based on physical fitness, it's temporary. Michael Jordan may have one time been the best basketball player on earth, but now that he's in his 60s, that's no longer the case. If you're the best violinist in the world, you may be for an extended period of your life, but eventually you will not be. And if ultimately your core identity is based in your ability to do something relative to other people, that's a pretty shaky foundation. And often you don't even have to lose capacity. You just have to change the room you're in, and your sense of yourself will change, because you may be a big fish in a little pond, and you may be the best at something in your particular room or group, but the moment you move to a different room or a different group and you encounter someone or many someones who are better than you at whatever it is that you find your identity in doing, suddenly the identity that you achieved is no longer there for you. And so that changes the way we view ourselves. Now, the third mistake we can make in identity is perceived identities, and that is the way we sense ourselves. And this, of course, affects this is related to things like gender identity, which is where much of this conversation is from. I feel like I am a man when my body tells me I'm a woman, or I feel like I am a woman when my body tells me I am a man. And there's other ways that dysphoria presents itself, but that's the most common in our culture. Now, all of this should lead us back to finding the place where our identity should come from. We talked about the weaknesses of having a received identity and the weaknesses of having an achieved identity. But the correct identity, the biblical identity, is having a received identity from the right place. And that, of course, is God. And the things that God has told us are true. And if our identity is rooted in that, it's a much safer place, because God's view of us doesn't change. And God's view of us is not based on what we are capable of doing. That's not true of all other people. Sometimes their view of us is going to change based on their mood. Sometimes their view of us is going to change based on our diminished capacity or increased capacity, whatever that is. But if we have received our identity from God, His view of us is not going to change. That becomes a very stable place. And it also speaks the truth to us, even if we are perceiving something different about ourselves, so our feelings don't allow us to adopt the wrong identity as well. So we can see here how this identity question certainly has application for a lot of our political discourse, but it has application far beyond that as well, which is why the source of our identity is a great discipleship opportunity.